You say to yourself, if all my customers would just pay me right now, I wouldn't have any of these problems. There's multiple ways that a construction company can feel growth. It can actually be organic growth. You are growing. You're doing 2 and 3 projects at a time when you used to do 1 and 2. It's a project cash flow calculator. It's free. You can use it at anytime you want. It'll tell you exactly where your cash flow deficits are, how much you need, when you need it in the project, and over what period of time. And here's the key. You're actually able to pay the loan back in line with when you are paid by your customer. Make sure you trust your gut, ask the right questions, make sure they understand construction, and that's one way you can consider project financing the right way. Going through our typical day, you're on a construction site, you're looking at your Gantt schedules, you're talking to your project managers, your superintendents, you're talking to your estimating team, everything's coming together. Projects are on the ground, crews are coming in and out of the office every morning, they're getting their stuff ready. All of a sudden, new work comes, new project starts, all coming together at one time. You got to order all the materials. Your labor has gone up from 50 grand a week to 100 grand a week. It's doubled in size. Whatever your metrics are, we've all been there. You say to yourself, if all my customers would just pay me right now, I wouldn't have any of these problems. We're going to address all this today and show you how a construction company experiencing massive growth, or a construction company who is now trying to execute many projects coming out of the ground all at the same time, can do it efficiently, safely, and as you designed it. My name is 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗽. I'm the CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding, and welcome to the next episode of the Construction MF'ers podcast. We're going to tackle these things today, and we're going to start right now. So let's talk about what growth looks like in the construction world. There's many ways it can happen. One, your estimators can start estimating and winning a heck of a lot more projects than they used to. That's one way. You can actually have a bunch of projects scheduled out perfectly for the next 6 months, and all of a sudden things change in the economy and they get moved up. They start coming out of the ground faster. Clients are asking you to redo your numbers or to confirm the numbers you gave them before. These things happen. There's multiple ways that a construction company can feel growth. It can actually be organic growth. You are growing. You're doing 2 and 3 projects at a time when you used to do 1 and 2. You're doing 5, 6 projects at a time when you used to do 4. Or you might be doing the same exact number of projects, but maybe you just had a slow quarter and now you have 3 or 4 all starting at the same time. Regardless of how it's happening, it feels the same every single time. And it's very important and critical for you as a construction business owner dealing with the cash flows that are built into construction. And we all know what they are. You spend all the money out front, you wait to get paid, and projects do not cash flow themselves from the start. That's a video for another day. Right now, we understand how that works, and we're going to talk about what you can do to mitigate that. Some of those ways are how do you use your own cash that's already in the business. Some of those ways are going to be what financing options do you have. Some of those ways are trying to figure out the best way to schedule, start, and maintain the projects that you have in front of you and how you want to go about executing them. There's multiple different ways, and we're going to tackle some of those now. All right, now on a project or in the business in general, we know that cash flow is the ultimate business killer. So if it's the ultimate business killer, it's the first thing you want to make sure you have control over and you want to make sure you're managing. Your cash flow, which is the amount of money you have coming in versus the amount of money you have going out over any given specific period of time, is what's critical. You can look at it first from a project perspective. You could then boil that down into the business, or you can boil it down week by week. Either way, it needs to start at a project level and then be added together with the entire business and then looked at on a weekly basis. The next thing, you want to take some analysis and make sure that the projects you are executing that you have finished, where are they based on how you set out to bid them? Some people call this project P&Ls, income statements, gain fade analysis is. Whatever you call it, we're talking about the same thing. The measurement of how well you're executing on the project, cost-wise, billing-wise, etc., against how you designed it from the beginning. Why is that so critical? Well, it's critical because if you're not executing to the plan and the way you bid it, it's going to impact your cash flow significantly in a negative manner, or it may impact your cash flow in a positive manner if you're finishing things faster, if they actually have less cost to them. Maybe you're saving on labor. Now, on the flip side, if it's actually costing you more, it's taking a longer period of time, those things are going to negatively impact your cash flow, and it's something you're going to have to manage very carefully so that you can accommodate the overall growth in your project and your business. Because when that growth starts, it's going to pull more cash from somewhere. And if you already are losing efficiency and losing cash on projects that you thought you would actually be gaining cash on or should be contributing positively, those are significant things that you not only have to adjust and measure against and plan for in the new project so that doesn't happen, but you also have to manage and adjust your cash because you're not going to have as much to use in the new projects. So cash flow is the ultimate business killer, which means you have to gain control over that first. And second, we have to manage these projects on a P&L basis, gain fade basis, and know where you're starting from. Let's talk about the ways to help impact this. We're going to get to financing options, but first I want to start with one other avenue. Let's talk about supplier, sub, and vendor terms. If you can get extended terms and you can lean on your suppliers for some better cash flow terms, which means, let's just say, if you could pay all of your suppliers and all of your labor when you're actually paid, you don't need financing and you can cash flow your project really well. All you're covering is your own miscellaneous costs. All right, now if that's not an option, can you move your suppliers, like your material suppliers or your equipment vendors, to a paid when paid scenario? And then you only have to manage your labor costs on a cash flow basis, analyze that. The last thing would be you can't move either one of those to paid when paid. So how far can you move? 30 days, 45 days. And how does that line up with when you're paid? For example, if you're going to bill at the end of December, for example, and you're going to be paid 45 days later on January 15th, and all of your vendors would allow you to be paid, to pay them on essentially January 30th, then you have 30 days of time that you don't have to worry about. However, come February 1st, before you're paid on February 15th, you have to figure out how you're going to float those 15 days. That's the amount of cash you're going to need to figure out. So what do you do? If you can't do either one of those options, materials or vendor payments, and delay them to when you're paid, actually, this is where your financing comes in. All right, let's go through a couple financing options and things you want to be thinking about and things you want to consider as it relates to your business, your cash flow, and construction. All right, financing wise. Now, let's say you have a big, juicy, healthy line of credit from your traditional bank and you have no balance owed on it. Well, that's the first thing you're going to use. You're going to look at your line of credit, make sure that you can access it, and make sure if that's enough money to get you through. Well, you're going to say to me, how do you know that? How do you know how much money it is? Is it enough? That's specifically project-based cash flows. We have one on our mobilization funding website. It's a project cash flow calculator. It's free. You can use it at anytime you want, and it'll tell you exactly where your cash flow deficits are, how much you need, when you need it in the project, and over what period of time. That will help you determine if you can align your line of credit to your cash flow and this project, and how much freedom do you need to have on that line of credit in order to be able to access it. The second method is, of course, cash in your business. Do you have enough working capital already in the business to manage each one of these projects? If not all of them, which ones can you manage, and what are the gaps on the other ones? The third method is project-based financing. You can do this in a few ways, but the concept basically is, if you're starting a project today, and there's a period of time somewhere in the future of that project where it will be cash flowing itself, meaning you're collecting enough money on a monthly basis in your pay applications to bridge the gap to get you to the next pay application, as well as cover your overhead. That is when the project itself becomes cash flow positive. Project-based financing analyzes for you what the total cost of the project is, like using our project cash flow tool, where those gaps are, and then being able to provide a loan that fills those gaps for the week by week expenses you need, marries up to when you're going to actually invoice the projects and when you'll receive the money, and then fills the negative cash flow gaps from there. So think about it like this. Maybe you have a set project and it's a $2 million job. Maybe it's a $500,000 job. Doesn't matter. The point is, if it's a $500,000 job and you figure out and determine that you need $100,000 or $120,000 to get from the beginning of the job to the point in which it's going to cash flow itself, maybe that's the first pay app, the second pay app, then what you're going to do is determine, where do you have to spend that $120,000? Maybe it's $10,000 a week for the first 6 weeks to cover payroll. Then you maybe have a $75,000 payment that you need to pay for materials that are coming in. You ordered them on day 1, but they're coming in on day 30. Those are the gaps that you need. Project-based financing will allow you to draw the money you need week by week to pay for those expenses, labor, equipment, or materials, or maybe per diems or other miscellaneous costs. And then in line with when you are paid, the loan program will be able to build the loan repayment with your paid. Basically meaning, if you're paid the first pay application, maybe it takes a smaller payment. Second pay application, another payment. When you're paid the third pay application, the final payment. That scenario and the setup of that, getting the funds when you need it the most, utilized for the project week by week, lowers your costs of overall financing because you're only paying for whatever you need whenever it's outstanding. It allows you access to the funds when you actually need it. And it allows you to know that you're going into the project with the right amount of money available to you to make it to the point where that project will then cash flow itself. And here's the key. You're actually able to pay the loan back in line with when you are paid by your customer. Those are the 4 key important facts that you need to consider when you're looking at project financing or the ability to finance a project using outside financing. When you work with a lender, it's important to think about, how can you trust them? How can you trust that these processes work? We've all seen other financing options out there where, sure, maybe they want to leverage your general contractor in the invoice, like factoring. That could work well if you can find a factoring company that your customer would like, communicate with, and also you want to work with. You could find a term loan, maybe from a private lender, that will allow you to just pay them back whenever you want, or over some monthly period that works for you. Or if none of those are an option, you could certainly look at mobilization funding or project funding options, and those can be an option for you too. But what's important is you want to make sure that you trust your gut when you're analyzing this lender. What does your gut tell you? Do they understand your actual company? Do they understand that they're financing construction and that what construction means? It rains sometimes, there's delays. The exact plan that you have doesn't always line up perfectly. The schedules can change. The amounts you invoice, the amounts you have cost, they're all different month to month, week to week sometimes, depending on the work schedules. It's important to know they understand your business. Second, you want to make sure they are familiar with the construction industry and the nuances. And third, you want to trust your gut and make sure that they can give you a program and a repayment schedule that you can live up to and is in line with when you're paid by your customer. Nothing's going to be worse if you create a loan program, find a lender and a loan, and then all of a sudden you're having to pay that loan back whenever you're not paid also. So now you have material suppliers that want to be paid before you're paid, you have labor that wants to be paid before you're paid, and now you have a lender that wants to be paid before you're paid. You can't have all three. You already have material suppliers that want to be paid before you're paid. You already have labor that wants to be paid before you're paid. You can't use a lender that needs to be paid before you're paid. So find those 3 things. Make sure you trust your gut. Ask the right questions. Make sure they understand construction. And that's one way you can consider project financing the right way. All right, let's bring this all together now. We've talked about how do you want to handle rapid growth in construction and in the ways in which rapid growth can appear for you. It can be multiple projects starting at the same time. It can be actual organic growth. You're going from 2 or 3 projects to 3 or 4 projects at a time. It can also be the way in which projects start moving. Maybe you have 3 projects all start at the same time. Maybe you do the same revenue at the end of the year, but I promise you, when 3 projects start at the same time and you didn't plan for that, you're probably going to feel like you're having some massive growth. That's first. Second, what are your options? Well, we talked about material suppliers. We talked about payroll. We talked about the ability to pay when paid. If you can pay when paid everything, you don't need financing. You can cash flow it. We've talked about sources of financing, cash in your business, lines of credit you already have, how to choose another lender, and most importantly, what is project-based financing and how can you do it? And lastly, the trust factor. Trust your gut. How to choose the right lender or financing source. Making sure you get the right data. Knowing if the projects you're using now, that gain fade analysis, that project P&L, whatever it is, you want to make sure you're analyzing those current things you're doing today to make sure if they're going to positively or negatively impact your cash flow. And then trust your gut picking the right lender. Make sure they understand how your business works. Make sure they understand how construction works. And most importantly, make sure they can build you a loan program and a repayment method that is in line with how you will be paid. Do those things and you'll be able to handle rapid growth as well. I hope this video helped you a lot. Please send and share this video if it did. Find us on LinkedIn, find us on our YouTube channel, subscribe, and till next time, God bless you, and we appreciate it. Thank you.